How does it make you guys feel that despite having Antonio Brown and Leonard Fournette, Antonio Brown, who's the number 2 ranked receiver, and Leonard Fournette, who's the number 6th ranked running back. And keep in mind, Leonard Fournette hasn't played in 3 weeks, and still, the amount of points that he was able to score those first few weeks have kept him in the top 10. Despite having those 2 players, I still managed to score 128 points, just 5 points shy of Jay's mark of 133 as the highest point total in the season last week. How does it make Paul feel that although there is a month left in the fantasy season, it's over? It's done. You win a championship last year and you don't even show up to the playoffs the following year. Oh, it was a joke 2 weeks ago when I said it. It was something in the chat that everybody could just say, oh, he's just talking shit. But Paul still looks like he's in it. Doesn't look like it's much of a joke now. Paul's got to win out if he wants any sort of a chance to compete for anything. If he has no chance. How does it make you guys feel that if I beat Orlando this week, I will clinch a first round bye with still a month to go? The last 3 best records in the league the past 3 years, in 2014 was Eric. At this point of the season, he had 808 points. He was 7-2. Me in 2015 with a record of 6-3 with 919 points. And Ed just last year with 923 points. He was also 8-1. Now I am 8-1 now with 945 points. How does it make you guys feel that Peggy, the guy who comes up here and talks all this shit at this point of the season, is looking like the favorite, or is the favorite? Because let's be honest. Jay said some shit in the chat when he was like, I cannot wait when you become one and done, courtesy of me, or whatever the fuck he said. He sounded like he was in an anime. Because you can say that, and that sounds really good, but there's been no evidence that anyone's going to beat me. There just hasn't. Because if it wasn't for like 4 buys the other week against Eric, we'd still be talking about an undefeated season. And this point moving forward, it doesn't seem like I'm going to lose because the matchups look to be in my favor. This week would be no different because Orlando has shown to be just like the rest of you. He's shown that if his key players don't perform, then the rest of his team doesn't perform. I already told you guys before that I had Fournette and I had Brown out, and I was still able to score 128 points. Now, that's because I still have Gurley. That's because I still have Dak. That's because I have somebody like Adrian Peterson who can come off the bench and could possibly score in the teens, and he's not touchdown dependent, Orlando. That's right. I was like 130-something yards. Not touchdown dependent. But what does Orlando have this week for me when he doesn't have an Amari Cooper, when he doesn't have even the Ravens defense, which is legit given Orlando, has given Orlando at least the opportunity of getting double-digit points, maybe 15, maybe 20 points. He doesn't have that option either. What is Orlando really going to do this week that's going to stop me from clinching? Ask yourselves this question. Does it bother you? Does it make you uncomfortable? Huh? Oh, this is your week 9 recap. Of course it doesn't make you feel uncomfortable. Of course it doesn't make you feel mad. After all, it's just fantasy, but you do have to feel like you're being a bit dominated, don't you? All 9 of you ugly motherfuckers. Okay, so it's always great when we can break records, when people chase history. And normally when I use the words chase history, it's meant to mock someone. The record for the lowest point total in a season was set by Joe last season with 900 points on the dot. At this point of the season, Joe had 601 points. He had scored 53 points just 3 weeks ago, then 88, and this past week, 55. So that's two 50-something point performances, in just under a month, which is awful. Paul has a grand total of 642. Hensel has 624. And Eric has 677. Now, I don't believe that any three of these people are going to beat Joe's record. I would hope, at least for their dignity, maybe not for Hensel's dignity because he's not paying attention, for Eric and Paul's dignity, they don't break this record. And Eric seems to be the one in the best position, obviously. He's got a 677. I mean, at this point, Eric can, he can pretty much still exceed 900 points and get about 60 to 70 points each week, and he'll be fine. But it's quite possible that these teams can experience it because Eric's last 3 weeks are 79, 46, 64. If you're capable of scoring 46 points, then we can't put anything past you. But, 46 points, I believe that's what I scored when I had my bye week when I lost against Eric. If that's what you're putting up, then we can't put anything past you. Hensel has more consistent scoring, 73, 71, 79. Then we have Paul, who had a high score 3 weeks ago with 105, 75, and 49. Again, there come the 40s. But it's just something to point out that just in case it happens, it is something that we will monitor here at the Recap Center. I'm calling this the Recap Center all of a sudden. Recap Center while I'm sitting on my bed and recording. Okay, so this is my last chance to remind you guys that the trade deadline is November 16th. November 16th, it will be your final chance at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which for Dro would be 9 p.m. It is your last chance to rid yourself of these horrible, horrible, horrible draft picks that you have committed yourself to, these lazy waiver pickups that you guys just picked up on a whim, all these quarterbacks that you have just sitting there that you can dump out and make more roster room for, those useless players that you have on IR. I think Eric still has Greg Olsen on IR. Yeah, that's Greg Olsen, but it's not like any cam receiver is really eating that much. You could sort of gauge what Greg Olsen would be doing if he were in the game right now. Of course, it creates an offensive distraction and, maybe, he opens up things for other players, but there's no need at this point of the season to keep Greg. Before I shit on Eric, and I already did, let's see if he still has Greg Olsen there. Let's see. Ewok Rape. Yeah, he still has Greg Olsen in there. Yeah, no surprise. Greg Olsen's been out since week 2. Both weeks he got 1 point each. So that's an Eric decision for you. But as I said, November 16th is your final chance to make those trades. So please keep that in mind. These next 4 teams are teams that I believe will make the playoffs because, as I told you guys last week, I believe that the bottom 4 are going to be Hensel, Paul, Eric, and Dro. Of course, 2 of those teams, it's pretty much looking like it's a definite. There may be, a switch up between either Eric or Hensel, if one of them can make it, which I seriously doubt, because I believe these next 4 teams are going to make the playoffs. These teams are Joe, Ed, Jay, and Andy. Now, their next 3 games are pretty much going to let you know where the advantages lie. And at this point, since I believe they're all going to make the playoffs, it's all just a matter of who's going to play Orlando in the first round and who's going to be sacrificed to me in the second round. Who's it going to be? At this point, one of you motherfuckers is going to be lunch. Let's get serious here. Jay can talk all the shit that he wants, but you don't want to face me in round 2. You don't. Why would you want to face the strongest team? Just just take out me and replace it with any of you if any of you had a record of 8-1. At this point, nobody wanted to face Ed round 1. I mean, if you were going to face, in round 2, of course, he lost to Paul, I believe, but you don't want that. That's not something that you're looking for. You'd rather get the easier road to the to the finals because, it's not like you have any control over any of this shit. You just play all your players. So, Jay, you don't want that. So you need to rephrase yourself before, what you're seeking actually fucking finds you, motherfucker, and you end up getting raped in the second round. That's if you make it. That's if you make it, Jay. So for the next 3 weeks, Joe's schedule is as follows. He faces Jay, then Paul, and Orlando. Ed faces Eric, Hensel, then me. Jay faces, of course, Joe, Orlando, and Paul. And Andy... Fuck you, Andy! And this is people just walking into the recap center, just fucking making their own fucking comments. Enough. But no, seriously, fuck you, Andy. Andy faces Paul, Eric, and Hensel. Now, I do believe that the hardest schedule from here on out is Joe. Joe's got the hardest shot here because he faces Paul. Sorry, not Paul. I apologize, Paul. You and Hard. Maybe next season we could talk about that, but that it just wasn't the case this season, sir. Jay first, and then Orlando to end out the season. So that's going to be a tough one for Joe. Whereas Ed, for example, yeah, he faces me the last week of the season, but, he's got Eric and then Hensel. He could easily win 2 consecutive games there. And Andy's got Paul, Eric, and Hensel. Andy's got the easiest schedule from here on out. So, I mean, with all our fuck you, Andy memes and all that, Andy does have the easiest shot to get pretty much a higher ranking, which, if I'm not mistaken, the playoff brackets are set up as number 1, who's obviously going to be me at this point. The number 1 seed faces the winner of the 5 and 4 ranked teams. So, you would want to, I guess, overthrow Orlando's position of the 3rd slot because the number 3 and 6 faces the 2nd place team. I mean, if you guys can admit that there's a huge difference between facing me in the 2nd round and facing Joe in the 2nd round, which would pretty much be the buys at this point, then you're lying to yourselves. So at this point, that's all we're basically arguing right now. I don't think any of these guys have to be worried about whether they're going to play in 4 weeks. I think it's pretty much locked in, but I do believe that the advantage goes to Andy. Jay also has a sort of tough run at it because he has Joe, Orlando, but then he has Paul to end out the season. So Jay's on the sort of semi-tough because the next 2 weeks are going to be pretty competitive, but to finish out, he's got Paul, so there's a strength there, and Jay already has more points than any of these teams. I mean, he's just behind me by maybe 50 or 60 points, I'm not even sure. So there's his advantage there. So the 2 advantages would pretty much go to Andy for having the schedule that's a bit lighter, and Jay just having more points. So in the event of a tie, Jay could get himself into that 3rd slot, the one that he claims he doesn't want, right, Jay? Because you want to face me, right? This is what you want. That's depending on what happens with Orlando, which will be a fucking loss this week. And I don't care what O thinks about it because it's fucking true. So let's move on to these past matchups here for week 9. And, of course, you had Peggy winning 128 to Paul's 49. You had Ewok Rape losing to Hensel 79 to 64. Ed defeating Orlando 86 to 57. Orlando's had this theme this season. Well, when I say theme, I mean, it's been 2 weeks now where he's pretty much lost because he left points in the bench. No one ever has any control over that. But it does make me smile that I'm able to bring that up. And that's a factor somehow because in week 7, he lost to Hensel 77 to 73. And that's when Amari Cooper scored 33 points on the bench. That's also the week when I spoke down on Amari Cooper and Orlando benched Amari Cooper. You see what's happening? Do you see what's happening? I talk down to your players, you bench your players. Is that what's happening? I talk down your players, and then you bench your players. And of course, this week, Orlando had the 20 points from Matt Forte, which he definitely could have used in place of that Marion Matt guy. So Orlando's leaving points on the bench. That's not something that you have any control over. It's not something that we can seriously laugh at you about, only if you are still the retard in 2017 who's playing 2 quarterbacks. And there are plenty of you doing that. So let's move on to Joe, who defeated Andy by a final score of 96-83. And Dad Bod loses a very close one to Pedro. That's going to hurt. I'll tell you that. That's going to hurt, because losing to Dro with such a close fucking game, and, you're going to look back and see those victories that were definitely within your grasp. And when you don't get it, that fucking sucks. And again, it's more of the same. It's the fact Le'Veon Bell was on a bye. Le'Veon Bell's on a bye. So Doug Martin is inserted into Jay's lineup and he gets no points. Oh, and by the way, just to even shit on my my opponent this week, Ed also beat Orlando with 2 zeros. He got a 0 from AJ Green and a 0 from Jason Witten, and he was still able to beat Orlando by more than 10 points. So if that doesn't tell you the state of where O's team is, then I don't know what will. Let's move on to our Week 10 matchups. And, of course, it is Peggy against Turtle Power. It's Eric versus Jason. We've got Paul versus Pedro, which I have to say is one of the most adorable matchups I've ever seen. This matchup is pretty much going to could determine who's going to get the number 1 pick, and that's legit. These are not jokes anymore, people. These are not jokes anymore. They're 3 games under 500, and one of them will be 4, unless, of course, they tie like they're Andy. One of them will be 4 games under 500. If that's not a guarantee that you're fucking out of it, then I don't know what is. At this point, it'll make more sense if Dro loses, because Dro's, he's sort of hasn't been in it the whole entire season. Paul maybe had a chance week 2 at halftime, but that's it. It's one loss, and that's it. You're down in the shadow realm. We also have Hensel going up against Joe, and Andy, fuck you, Andy, going up against Ed. This is it, man. This is it. This is what you play for in fantasy. You play to have meaningless games moving forward. You play to get these victories, so the next month means absolutely nothing. I can lose however many games I fucking want from this point. I may even bench some players. What do you guys think about that? No, I wouldn't do that. That's the most terrible thing that you could do. I want to hurt as many of you as I can. I want to play spoiler as well, so I won't be doing that. Not to worry. But as always, may your players get hurt before they leave the locker room. May your running backs pull their hamstrings, and may your wide receivers get arrested for marijuana possession. Go yourselves.